A janitor saves the CEO's life. But that single act drags him into a world of betrayal, conspiracy, and shadows hunting his daughter. What would you do if protecting family meant stepping into war? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. The glass walls of the boardroom caught the morning light and threw it across a table heavy with contracts and sharpened pencils. 12 executives argued in measured voices, their suits the color of storm clouds. At the back of the room, a man pushed a quiet mop along the marble floor. His name was Michael Turner, a single father who had learned to listen harder than most people speak. Michael knew the rhythms of this building. The elevator chime that always lagged on the 32nd floor. The printer that squealed when the paper tray was half empty. The way people tried not to notice a man in a janitor's jacket. He had long ago made peace with invisibility. It let him see more. He saw it in the small things first. A fountain pen slipping in a steady hand. A smile that started bright and then thinned to a line. The company head, Victoria Kane, leaned over a stack of pages, eyes shining too much, cheeks pale beneath careful makeup. She blinked longer than a person blinks when they are simply tired. Her left hand found the edge of the table as if it were the only solid thing in the room. Michael slowed his mop and watched. He had seen these beats before. Once, in a tiny kitchen lit by a single bulb, his late wife had stood just like that, swaying gently, a teacup trembling in her fingers. The memory carried a taste of metal and fear. He heard the quiet thud of a heart that was not his. He counted the seconds between Victoria's breaths. Too wide. He watched her knuckles turn white around a fountain pen. Too tight. A vice president droned about targets. Another joked about margins. No one looked at the woman at the head of the table. Victoria's signature skated across the page, then faltered. The pen scratched. The page tore. Her chair shifted. For a breath she seemed to drift, as if the room tilted under her feet. The mop stopped moving. Michael's palms felt raw around the handle. He measured the distance to the sideboard where a catering tray sat with coffee and sparkling water. Nothing sweet. He scanned the room again and found a forgotten paper cup holding orange juice, a bright coin of color near the sink. Victoria's lips parted. Air came in with a hiss. Her gaze lost its focus and then tried to find it again. The room kept talking, the way a river keeps moving even as someone slips beneath the surface. Michael heard his daughter's voice in his head, a simple thing from breakfast, a joke about toast. He felt the shape of the promise he made to her every day. Pay attention. Be brave when it counts. He put the mop aside. The wheels rumbled softly against the floor. He crossed the distance in 4 hard steps, each one a decision. A director lifted an eyebrow, annoyed by the intrusion of a man who did not belong to the conversation. Michael did not slow. He reached the sideboard, grabbed the orange juice, and turned. Victoria braced a hand on the table. The room leaned closer to a line that could not be uncrossed. Michael met her eyes, and for a moment the mask fell away. He saw fear, clear and sharp, and the quiet plea behind it. He set the cup on the table. His voice was steady, not loud, not soft, just a line drawn in the air. Drink this now. The room froze, the way a clock seems to stop in the instant before something shatters. Every executive turned, their polished faces carved into disbelief. A janitor had spoken during the most critical meeting of the quarter. One of the directors, a man with silver cufflinks and a jaw like steel, snapped first. Sit down. Do your job. His words cracked across the boardroom like a whip. A few others chuckled nervously, as though the interruption were nothing more than a mistake to be brushed aside. But Michael did not move. His eyes stayed fixed on Victoria. He remembered another night long ago, his wife's lips blue, his hands fumbling for sugar. He had learned the hard way that hesitation could kill. He pushed the cup closer, his knuckles brushing the edge of Victoria's papers. She blinked, slow and heavy. Her fingers twitched as if fighting her own body. She needs this now, Michael said again, firmer. His tone carried no doubt, only urgency. The silver cufflinks man stood, ready to order him out, but Victoria's hand finally moved. Weak but deliberate, she curled her fingers around the cup. Her nails tapped once against the paper rim. Michael guided it gently toward her lips. The orange juice touched, then poured, the golden liquid trembling against the glass of the boardroom light. Silence drowned the room. Every executive stared as their leader drank like a woman returning from the edge of a cliff. Her shoulders sagged, the tightness in her face softening with each swallow. A faint color bled back into her cheeks. Michael exhaled slowly, though no one heard it. His heart still pounded, but his voice was calm. "Give her a minute." Victoria set the cup down with trembling fingers. The silence stretched until she finally lifted her gaze. Not at her board. Not at the man with cufflinks. She looked only at Michael. Her voice, though faint, carried authority. "Everyone out." The executives hesitated, but she repeated it, sharper this time. "Oh." Chairs scraped the floor, expensive shoes clicked against the marble, papers were hastily gathered. They left with glances that shifted between confusion and irritation, none daring to challenge her command. When the door closed and the glass walls sealed them off from the world, the room held only two people, the woman who nearly fell, and the man no one had seen until he stepped forward. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her breath steadying. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a half-smile that was equal parts exhaustion and curiosity, she whispered, "Who are you really, mister?" Michael met her gaze, standing tall despite the janitor's jacket on his shoulders. "Turner," he answered. Michael Turner. And for the first time in years, Victoria Kane allowed herself to look at someone not as a tool, not as a threat, but as a man who had just saved her life. Victoria's eyes lingered on him, sharp yet softened by the weight of what had just happened. Her reputation was built on steel and fire, but now there was a flicker of vulnerability she could not mask. She reached for the orange juice again, taking one careful sip, as if reassuring herself that the world was still steady beneath her. Michael stood silent, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. Years of being invisible had trained him not to fill the air unless it was necessary. He waited, knowing she would speak when she was ready. Finally, her voice cut through the quiet. "How did you know?" she asked, her tone measured, probing. "None of them saw anything. But you were certain." Michael's jaw tightened. He glanced down for a moment before answering. "My wife," he began, the words slower, heavier. "She had type 1 diabetes. I learned what the signs looked like. Trembling hands, pale skin, unfocused eyes. I saw it in you." A shadow passed across Victoria's face. She studied him, as though testing whether his story was truth or a carefully crafted lie. Then, almost reluctantly, she gave a small nod. "So it wasn't luck. It was experience." Michael didn't respond. He didn't need to. The silence spoke enough. Victoria leaned forward, elbows on the table, her gaze narrowing as she examined the man before her. "You were the only one who noticed. Do you know what that means?" Michael shifted slightly, uncertain of her angle. "I only did what anyone should do." Her lips curved into a thin smile that held no humor. "That's the problem, Mr. Turner. No one else did. And these are the people paid millions to have their eyes open." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Victoria's fingers tapped against the polished wood of the table. Then she straightened, her voice lower, more deliberate. "Tell me something, Michael. Do you like this job? Cleaning up after people who don't even see you?" Michael's throat tightened. He thought of Emma waiting at home, her backpack leaning against the door, her drawings taped to the refrigerator. He thought of bills stacked in a neat pile on the counter, waiting to be paid with the wages from this very job. "It's honest work," he said finally. "It keeps the lights on." Victoria's eyes glimmered, almost as if she respected the answer. She stood slowly, smoothing her suit, her presence filling the room again. But something in her had shifted. "I need someone like you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Someone who actually pays attention." Michael blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "Meet me in my office tonight, after your shift. Alone." She walked toward the door, heels striking the marble in steady rhythm. Before leaving, she turned, her gaze locking with his once more. "If you show up, you'll understand what I mean." The door clicked shut, leaving Michael alone in the vast silence of the boardroom. His mop leaned forgotten in the corner, but his heart beat like a drum. He did not know yet that the choice to walk into her office that night would change everything, for him and for his daughter. The building emptied with the slow hush of twilight. Elevators dinged less often, voices thinned to echoes, and the grand lobby that usually pulsed with power fell into silence. Michael finished his shift like he always did, methodical, steady, but his mind was nowhere near the floors he scrubbed. Victoria's words echoed inside him like a bell that would not stop ringing. By the time the clock struck 10, the skyscraper seemed hollow. Only a few lights burned on the upper floors. Michael took off his gloves, washed the scent of bleach from his hands, and thought of Emma. She was safe at home with Mrs. Klein, the retired neighbor who had become something of a grandmother to her. He had told Emma he might be late, but not why. How could he? The private elevator chimed open for him, as if summoned. He hesitated, then stepped in. The mirrored walls reflected a tired man in a janitor's jacket, but his eyes carried something sharper now. Curiosity, unease, maybe even courage. When the doors slid open on the top floor, the atmosphere changed. Victoria's office was vast, lined with glass that revealed the glowing sprawl of the city. She stood at the window, a silhouette against the lights, her posture rigid. On her desk sat a thick file, its edges frayed, its contents spilling in black and white photographs. "You came," she said without turning. Michael closed the door behind him. "I said I would." She finally faced him, her expression unreadable. She gestured toward the file. "Look." Michael stepped closer and pulled one of the photos free. His stomach tightened. It was Victoria, stepping out of her car, walking into her home, sitting by a cafe window. Some shots were grainy, taken from a distance. Others were uncomfortably close, as if the photographer had been only a few feet away. "Someone's been watching me," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "They know my schedule, my routes, even my private meetings. These didn't come from the press. This is someone on the inside." Michael set the photo down slowly, his fingertips lingering on the image. "Why show me this?" "Because," Victoria replied, "you notice things others don't. You're not blinded by money or ambition. And most importantly, you're not one of them." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you work for me, you'll be my eyes and ears. But it won't be safe. Whoever is behind this has resources. They won't hesitate to hurt anyone close to me, or to you." Michael's chest tightened. He thought of Emma again, her laughter, her trust. He felt the weight of a father's promise press against his ribs. He looked up, meeting Victoria's eyes. His voice was steady, stripped of hesitation. "I already told you. I'm in." Victoria studied him for a moment, then gave the faintest nod. "Good. Then understand this, Michael Turner. From tonight on, you are no longer invisible." The city lights glowed brighter behind her, but for Michael, the night had never felt darker. The subway ride home rattled with a rhythm that could not quiet Michael's thoughts. The file of photographs was burned into his memory, the angles, the shadows, the eerie closeness of the stalker's lens. He had walked into Victoria's office a janitor, and walked out something else entirely, though he wasn't sure what name to give it. When he opened the apartment door, the familiar creak of the hinges grounded him. The air smelled faintly of crayons and toast. On the couch, 10-year-old Emma Turner was fast asleep, a picture book slipping from her hand, her head resting on Mrs. Klein's knitted blanket. Her small chest rose and fell in even breaths. Michael crouched beside her, gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. For a moment, the world narrowed to this simple sight: his daughter safe, innocent, unaware of the storm forming outside their lives. He whispered, soft enough not to wake her, "I'll keep you safe, kiddo. Always." In the kitchen, he poured himself a glass of water, his hands still trembling. He thought of the risk Victoria had laid bare. Whoever was circling her could easily turn their eyes toward him now. Toward Emma. He tightened his grip on the glass until it threatened to crack. Michael sat at the small table stacked with bills and school permission slips. He stared at Emma's handwriting on a bright blue note taped to the fridge. "Good luck at work, Dad. You're the best janitor in the world." The words made his throat tighten. She believed in him with the pure certainty only a child could hold. And now, he realized, he could no longer simply mop floors and fade into the background. The choice he made in that boardroom had pulled them both into something larger, something dangerous. A sound stirred from the living room. Emma shifted under her blanket, her voice groggy. Dad, you're home. Michael forced a smile as he walked back to her side. Yeah, kiddo. I'm home. Emma blinked up at him with sleepy eyes. Did you have a hard day? Michael hesitated, then kissed the top of her head. Nothing I can't handle. But as he watched her drift back into dreams, he knew the truth. The days ahead would test every part of him, his courage, his strength, and the vow he had just made in silence. Because being a father meant more than raising a daughter. It meant protecting her from enemies she didn't even know existed. And now, those enemies were already watching. Morning came with the soft buzz of the city outside their apartment window. Michael walked Emma to school, her small hand swinging in his. She talked about a class art project, about how she wanted to draw a dragon that could protect castles. Michael smiled, but the word protect echoed in his mind like an omen. When he returned to the skyscraper, the building looked different. The glass tower no longer shimmered as a place of work, it loomed, hiding secrets behind every reflection. He swiped his ID, stepped through security, and felt eyes linger on him longer than usual. On the 32nd floor, as he pushed his cart down the corridor, he noticed something odd. A man in a charcoal suit leaned near the elevators, pretending to scroll through his phone. Michael had seen him before, 2 nights ago, at the corner deli where he bought Emma's favorite cereal. Same suit. Same blank face. The mop slowed. Michael's chest tightened. Coincidence was a word for people who didn't pay attention. Later that evening, Victoria summoned him to her office again. She stood behind her desk, the city glittering behind her like scattered jewels. Without a word, she slid a fresh envelope across the table. Inside were more photographs, new ones. Victoria entering the building that very morning. Victoria's car parked outside her penthouse. Even Victoria's reflection captured in the glass of a cafe. Whoever it is, they're getting closer, she said, her tone sharp. And I can't trust anyone here. Michael studied the photos. His stomach knotted when he noticed the edge of another figure reflected faintly in one of the windows. The man in the charcoal suit. He was sure of it. He looked up. They're inside the building, he said quietly. Victoria's jaw clenched, her eyes narrowing. That's why I need you, Michael. You see what others miss. A silence stretched, heavy with the weight of what had been spoken. Michael thought of Emma again, her dragon drawing, her smile. He felt the line between his quiet life and this dangerous new world growing thinner, fraying with every passing day. Finally, he nodded, his voice low but certain. Then I'll keep watching. Whoever they are, they won't stay hidden forever. Victoria studied him, her expression unreadable, before giving a slow, deliberate nod. Good. Because if we don't find them first, they'll come for us. The lights from the city cast long shadows across the glass walls, and Michael felt the truth settle in his bones. The game had already begun. The next few days blurred into a rhythm of vigilance. Michael cleaned the hallways, emptied the bins, and polished the marble floors, yet every step doubled as surveillance. He noticed badges swiped twice in the same minute, strangers who lingered near restricted doors, and the way conversations cut off when he passed. The building whispered, and he listened. One night, after finishing a late shift, Michael walked into the underground garage. The air was damp, carrying the scent of oil and rubber. His boots echoed against concrete as he crossed toward his old sedan. That's when he saw it. A white envelope sat tucked beneath his windshield wiper. No postage, no markings, just his name written in block letters, Turner. Michael's breath caught. He slid it free, glancing around. The garage was nearly empty, but shadows pressed thick at the edges. He opened the envelope under the harsh glow of a fluorescent lamp. Inside was a single photograph, Emma. She was at the playground near their apartment, her hair tied back, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The image was recent. Too recent. Michael's hand tightened around the photo until it crumpled. A second sheet slipped out, smaller, with 5 words scrawled in black ink. Stay out, or she pays. His pulse roared in his ears. He scanned the garage again, every corner a threat, every parked car a possible watchful eye. For the first time since he'd stepped into this dangerous new role, fear clawed at him, not for himself, but for Emma. When he got home, he found her asleep again on the couch, the picture book open on her chest. He sat beside her, the crumpled photo burning in his pocket. He brushed her hair gently and forced his breathing to steady. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow, he would tell Victoria. But deep down, Michael knew the truth. The enemy had already found his weakness. And they had left their warning where he could not ignore it. The shadows weren't just watching Victoria anymore. They were watching him. Morning broke, but Michael hardly slept. Every creak of the floorboards in his small apartment felt like a threat. Every car passing outside made his hand twitch toward the door. When Emma woke, rubbing her eyes and smiling up at him, he forced a calm he did not feel. He packed her lunch, kissed the top of her head, and watched her walk into school with a weight pressing on his chest. At the skyscraper, Victoria Kane was already waiting. She stood by her office window, a storm in her expression. The night's sleepless hours had not dulled her sharpness. If anything, they made her words cut deeper. "You look worse than me, Turner." "What happened?" Michael set the envelope on her desk. The photo slid out, Emma's face frozen in a moment of innocent laughter. Then the note, short and merciless. "Stay out, or she pays." Victoria's eyes hardened as she picked it up. "Whoever sent this knows you're with me now." "They're escalating." Michael's jaw clenched. His voice was low, heavy. "They followed my daughter. That makes this war personal." Victoria circled her desk, standing closer, her tone lower. "You still have a chance to walk away, Michael. Take Emma, disappear. No one would blame you." Michael shook his head before she could finish. He had thought of it, dreamed of running, but the truth pressed too firmly in his gut. If they could find him once, they could find him again. There was no safe place anymore, not unless the threat was confronted. "I can't run," he said firmly. "If I hide, they'll only keep chasing us. The only way Emma is safe is if I finish this." Victoria studied him for a long moment, her gaze measuring the resolve in his eyes. Finally, she nodded slowly, as though accepting a pact neither of them could undo. "Then we're in this together." She opened a locked drawer and pulled out a slim folder. Inside were names, schedules, and coded emails she had been gathering quietly. Threads of betrayal that wound back to her own board of directors. She laid them out between them. "Here's where we start," she said. "You wanted to protect your daughter? Find the traitor, and we cut off their power before they cut into us." Michael looked down at the papers, then back at Victoria. For the first time, he wasn't just a janitor pulled into something larger. He was a father with no choice but to fight back. And the war for Emma's safety and Victoria's survival had just begun. The folder spread open on Victoria's desk was more than paper. It was a map of treachery, names tied to numbers, time scrawled in coded shorthand, and photographs clipped together with red ink marks circling faces. Michael leaned over it, scanning every detail. He wasn't a detective, but years of watching people had trained him to spot what didn't fit. 3 names kept repeating across the pages. Board members. Men who smiled too easily in photographs, their handshakes captured in news clippings, their smiles polished for cameras. But behind those smiles lay meetings that didn't belong, dinners unlogged in official schedules, phone calls made at hours when no business should have been discussed. Victoria tapped her manicured nail against one particular photo. Richard Hale, Chief Financial Officer. He's been with me for over a decade. Loyal on the surface, but these records show he's been feeding data to someone offshore. Not leaks to the press, something darker. Michael studied the man's face in the photo. Hale's smile was thin, his eyes hidden behind the glare of glasses. He looked ordinary, unremarkable. But Michael had learned that evil rarely came in a mask. It came dressed like everyone else. Why not confront him? Michael asked quietly. Victoria gave a humorless laugh. Confrontation without proof makes me look paranoid. These men already circle like vultures. If I show weakness, they'll finish me. Michael nodded slowly. Then we need proof. Victoria's gaze locked on his. You mean you need to get proof? The words settled heavily in the room. Michael felt the weight of Emma's laughter, the photograph left on his windshield, the note that had promised she would pay the price. If he backed away now, he would always be waiting for the next shadow outside his window. He exhaled, steadying himself. Then tell me where to start. Victoria slid another sheet toward him, a list of Hale's upcoming meetings, addresses scribbled in sharp ink. If you follow him, watch carefully, and bring me something undeniable, I can cut him out before he destroys me. Before he destroys us. Michael tucked the papers into his jacket. His hands were steady, but his heart thudded like war drums. As he left her office, the reflection of the city in the glass walls seemed different, colder, more watchful. He was stepping out of the shadows he had lived in for years and into a darker one, where the line between survival and ruin would blur. And beneath it all, one promise anchored him: Emma would not become collateral in a war she didn't even know existed. He would not let them touch her. The city at night was a maze of headlights and neon. Michael's old sedan blended easily into the stream of traffic as he trailed Richard Hale's sleek black town car. He kept 2 cars back, never too close, just another forgettable driver among hundreds. His hands gripped the wheel, steady, but his chest was tight with the thought of Emma's face in that photograph. Hale's car turned sharply off the main avenue and slipped into the narrow veins of the city where tall glass towers gave way to dim warehouses. Michael followed, easing into the shadows. He parked a block away, killed the engine, and watched as Hale stepped out, flanked by a younger man carrying a briefcase. They entered a building with no sign, just a rusted steel door. Michael's instincts prickled. The place reeked of secrecy. He slid from his car, moving with the quiet patience he had honed over years of janitorial work, silent, unnoticed, practiced in making himself invisible. He crept along the alley, keeping to the edges where the light fractured into broken lines. From a crack in the grimy window, he saw them inside. Hale sat at a table, his glasses reflecting the dim glow of a hanging lamp. The younger man opened the briefcase, revealing stacks of papers, contracts stamped with company seals Michael recognized. Hale's voice carried through the thin walls, muffled but clear enough. He was naming accounts, wiring instructions, dates that aligned with the schedules Victoria had shown him. Michael's stomach tightened. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, sabotage against the very company he was sworn to protect. Hale wasn't just selling information. He was dismantling Victoria's empire piece by piece. Suddenly, the younger man turned toward the window. Michael jerked back, pressing himself flat against the wall. His breath stilled, his heart hammering. For a moment, the silence screamed louder than sound. The door creaked open. Footsteps echoed in the alley. Michael slipped deeper into shadow as Hale's associate lit a cigarette, scanning the darkness. Smoke curled into the air, drifting close. Michael clenched his fists, forcing himself not to move. At last, the man flicked the cigarette butt to the ground and retreated inside. The door slammed shut. Michael exhaled slowly, his pulse racing. He had seen enough. More than enough. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, scrawling details, the names, the figures, the faces, every piece of the puzzle he could remember. As he walked back to his car, his gut twisted with the knowledge of what came next. He had the beginnings of proof, but getting it into Victoria's hands meant moving faster than Hale, faster than the ones pulling Hale's strings. And somewhere, hidden in the city's shadows, he knew the people who had photographed Emma were already watching. He slid behind the wheel, eyes hard in the rear-view mirror. This wasn't just surveillance anymore. This was war. By dawn, Michael was back in Victoria's office, the city's skyline awash in pale light. He spread his notes across her desk, recounting every detail of what he'd seen: Hale's secret meeting, the contracts, the coded instructions. His voice was steady, but the exhaustion beneath it was clear. Victoria listened in silence, her expression carved from stone. When he finished, she leaned back, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "This is worse than I thought. He isn't just leaking information. He's dismantling the foundation. Slowly, quietly, so that when it collapses, no one sees who pushed." Michael nodded grimly. "I saw it with my own eyes. He's not alone either. Someone's bankrolling this. Someone with reach." Victoria's gaze flickered toward the window, as though the city itself were listening. Then she leaned forward. "We need physical proof, contracts, signatures, something that can't be denied. Until then, this is just my word against his. And if I accuse him too soon, he'll turn the board against me." Michael considered her words. He had seen the documents in that briefcase. Getting to them would mean walking straight into the lion's den. Dangerous, maybe suicidal. But then he thought of the photograph of Emma, the scrawled threat. The danger was already at his doorstep. Victoria broke the silence. "There's something else. Last night, my driver found this slipped under the car door." She handed him a folded sheet. Michael opened it carefully. Inside was a typed note, the letters clipped and cold. "The janitor doesn't belong. Remove him, or he won't see his daughter grow up." Michael's blood chilled. His hand tightened around the paper until it crumpled. They were no longer whispering from the shadows. They were naming him directly. Victoria's eyes softened, only for a heartbeat. "You don't have to stay in this, Michael. They've marked you now, and they know where to strike." Michael shook his head, his voice iron. "Leaving doesn't make Emma safer. It makes her prey." For a long moment, Victoria studied him, as if weighing his resolve against the risk. Finally, she slid a small black keycard across the desk. "This opens the archive on the 39th floor. That's where Hale's official files are stored. If he's stupid enough, the trail will be there." Michael pocketed the card, his jaw set. "Then I'll find it." Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Be careful. Hale isn't just a thief. Men like him always carry poison." Michael left the office with the keycard burning like a brand in his pocket. He knew tonight he would step into Hale's world, into locked floors and shadowed archives. And if he was caught, it wouldn't be a warning note that awaited him. It would be silence, permanent and absolute. Night fell heavy over the skyscraper. Most of the building slept, its workers long gone, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights and the low murmur of air vents. Michael wheeled his janitor's cart down the corridor like he had 1,000 times before. But tonight, every squeak of the mop bucket echoed louder, every shadow felt deeper. When the elevator doors slid open on the 39th floor, the hallway was dark. This was no place for janitors. The archive floor smelled different: cold paper, old dust, and the faint tang of metal. Rows of locked cabinets stretched into the dimness, their steel frames reflecting the thin light like soldiers standing at attention. Michael swiped the black keycard Victoria had given him. A green light blinked, followed by a low click. He pushed the door open and slipped inside. The room was silent except for the ticking of a wall clock. He moved quickly, scanning labels until he found Hale's section. Drawer after drawer of files slid open, thick folders stamped confidential spilling with numbers and names. He pulled a few, flipping through contracts and bank statements. At first, they looked ordinary, until he saw the codes. Offshore accounts, wire transfers to shell companies, payments disguised as consulting fees. This was it. The proof Victoria needed. Michael pulled out his phone and began snapping photos page by page, his hand steady despite the pounding in his chest. He filled the screen with signatures, routing numbers, every incriminating detail he could find. Then, footsteps. He froze, phone halfway raised. The sound was soft, deliberate, moving closer down the corridor outside. Someone else was here. Michael shoved the files back into the cabinet and killed the light on his phone. He pressed himself flat against the shelves, his breath shallow. The door opened with a slow creak, letting in a sliver of dim light. A shadow moved inside. Tall, broad-shouldered. Michael recognized the outline instantly. Hale's associate, the younger man with the briefcase. He stepped in, scanning the rows with a predator's patience. Michael's heart thudded in his ears. The man walked deeper into the archive, a flashlight beam slicing across the shelves. It swept closer, closer, until it skimmed the edge of Michael's shoe. Michael clenched his fists, ready to strike if he had to. But before the beam found him, the man stopped. He crouched by a different cabinet, unlocked it with a key of his own, and pulled out a slim folder. He flipped it open, muttering something under his breath. Then he slid it into his jacket. Michael's mind raced. A second secret. Another piece of the puzzle. But if he revealed himself now, the game would be over. The man turned, flashlight beam swinging wide across the room. For an instant, Michael swore it landed on him. His pulse spiked. But then, the man clicked it off and left. The door shut behind him with a soft thud. Michael waited in the darkness, his body taut as wire. Only when the silence returned did he exhale. He clutched his phone, the images stored inside. Enough proof to bury Hale. Yet his gut told him the folder taken tonight was something even darker. And whoever carried it was walking deeper into the shadows than Michael had ever imagined. Michael drove home through streets washed in midnight neon, the images he had captured glowing in his mind like fire. Bank records, contracts, signatures, undeniable proof of Hale's betrayal. But as powerful as those documents were, something about the man in the archive lingered like a thorn under his skin. The way he'd moved, the folder he'd taken, the secrecy that seemed separate from Hale's own greed. By the time Michael reached his apartment, exhaustion tugged at him, but he couldn't sleep. Emma was curled up in bed, her dragon drawing taped proudly above her pillow. He kissed her forehead, then sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, scrolling through the photos he had taken. Line after line of stolen money and coded transfers scrolled past his eyes. Yet one detail snagged him, a repeated reference to Project Nix. The name appeared across multiple contracts, but no explanation followed. Just initials, signatures, and hidden accounts funneling funds toward it. What is Nix? Michael whispered to himself. The next morning, in Victoria's office, he laid the evidence out. She scanned the images, her expression darkening with every page. When she reached the final shot, she leaned back, exhaling slowly. This will bury him. With these, I can bring Hale before the board and cut him out cleanly. Michael hesitated. What about the folder your man took? The one from a separate cabinet? Victoria's eyes narrowed. What folder? Michael described what he'd seen. Her face paled, not with fear, but with recognition. There's only one other set of files stored on that floor. Personal dossiers. Surveillance records. Not just mine. Everyone's. Michael frowned. Surveillance? By the company. Not by the company, Victoria corrected sharply. By someone inside it. Those files hold leverage, blackmail, weaknesses, secrets. If he has them, then Hale isn't working alone. He's a pawn. The realization struck them both at once. Hale's betrayal was just the surface. Someone else had orchestrated the scheme, someone powerful enough to turn the company into a weapon. Victoria closed the folder of evidence with a snap. Hale is finished. But the one pulling the strings, that's who we're really fighting. Michael thought of Emma's photo under his windshield, the threat scrawled in ink. Whoever had taken that folder wasn't protecting Hale. They were targeting him and Victoria both. He stood slowly, his jaw set. Then finding out who they are isn't just your war anymore. It's mine. Victoria met his gaze, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of truth. Then you'd better be ready, Michael. Because the deeper we dig, the darker it gets. And somewhere in that darkness, Project Nix waited, its name whispering like a warning neither of them yet understood. The word lingered between them like smoke. Nix. A name with no definition, no face, only the weight of something dangerous hidden behind it. Victoria pulled a laptop from her drawer and typed quickly, her fingers dancing across the keys. Her access cut through layers of the company's encrypted database. She searched for the term, but every entry ended the same way, redacted. Entire pages blocked out with digital black bars. Whoever created Project Nix, she muttered, they buried it deep. Too deep for even me. Michael stood at the window, staring at the city below. Lights blinked in steady rhythm, but all he saw was the photograph of Emma taped to his fridge. If Nix was tied to Hale's betrayal and to the threats against his daughter, then this wasn't just about corporate sabotage. This was something else. Victoria slammed the laptop shut. The only people who could hide records this well are people with board-level clearance. Which means... Michael finished her thought quietly. Which means the traitor isn't just Hale. It's someone above him. Someone bigger. A silence stretched between them. The weight of it pressed hard against Michael's chest. Victoria straightened, her voice cool and deliberate. If we expose Hale too quickly, the real hand behind Nix will vanish deeper underground. We need him to lead us to whoever's pulling the strings. Michael shook his head. He won't lead us anywhere if he knows we're onto him. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Then we let him think he's safe. That night, Michael trailed Hale again. This time, the CFO wasn't meeting in a warehouse. He drove to a glass tower on the city's edge, its top floors glowing faintly against the skyline. Michael parked far enough away to blend into the dark. From the shadows, he watched Hale step out of his car, briefcase in hand, and enter through a private door guarded by two men in black suits. No company logos, no visible IDs. The kind of men paid to make problems disappear. Michael's pulse quickened. He pulled out his phone and zoomed in. The building wasn't just an office. The higher floors were shrouded, the windows blacked out, but faint silhouettes moved inside. And then he saw it. A symbol etched discreetly on the side door, a crescent arc wrapping around a single black star. Michael snapped a photo, his gut twisting. When he showed it to Victoria later, her face drained of color. "I've seen that symbol before," she whispered. "Years ago, during a merger that almost destroyed us. It belonged to a private consortium. Ruthless. Hidden. They called themselves Nix." Michael's jaw tightened. "So Project Nix isn't a project. It's a people." Victoria nodded grimly. "And if they've returned, then this isn't about money anymore. It's about power. Control." Michael thought of Emma again, of her dragon drawing taped above her bed. He clenched his fists, his voice steady, cold. "Then we're not just fighting Hale. We're fighting an entire shadow empire." Victoria's eyes met his, sharp as steel. "And if we lose, Michael, they won't just take me down. They'll take you. And Emma too." The room fell silent, but beneath it, Michael felt the truth like a knife against his throat. The war wasn't coming. It was already here. The city's night sky stretched wide and indifferent, its glittering towers masking the storm brewing beneath. Michael sat in his car 2 blocks from the Nix building, the photo of Emma tucked into his wallet like a shield. His phone buzzed with a single message from Victoria. "Board meeting. Hale moves tomorrow. Be ready." Michael's eyes narrowed. Tomorrow wasn't just business. It was the opening move of a war. He spent the night awake, reviewing every detail, every face, every moment he had captured. Hale was no longer just a traitor. He was bait. And Nix, the shadow empire that had already marked Emma, would be watching every step. At dawn, Michael walked Emma to school, her small hand clutching his. She looked up at him with a smile, unaware of the predators circling just beyond their world. "Dad, do you think dragons are real?" she asked. Michael forced a steady smile. "Yes, sweetheart. They're real. And sometimes, they protect castles." She laughed, twirled once on the sidewalk, then ran toward her classroom. Michael watched her until she disappeared inside, the promise in his chest turning to iron. Back at the skyscraper, Victoria was waiting in her office, sharp in a navy suit that gleamed like armor. Papers littered her desk, evidence, contracts, photographs, all lined up for the confrontation ahead. "Hale thinks today he will tighten the noose," she said. "Instead, we'll put it around his neck." Michael nodded, but his gut churned. He knew Nix wouldn't let their pawn fall without a fight. The note under his windshield, the photograph of Emma, the men in suits, they were already too close. Victoria's voice softened for a rare moment. "Are you ready, Michael? Once we start, there's no turning back." He met her gaze, his voice low, steady, unflinching. "I was ready the moment they threatened my daughter." Outside, the boardroom was already filling with power suits and polished smiles. Hale's laughter carried down the corridor, smooth and rehearsed. But Michael heard something else beneath it, the arrogance of a man who thought himself untouchable. The doors closed, sealing them inside. Folders opened, accusations prepared. And in the shadows of the glass walls, unseen eyes waited for the perfect moment to strike. Michael's pulse slowed, his focus sharpening. He was no longer just a janitor cleaning up other people's messes. He was a father, a protector, and now, the one thing Nix had never counted on. An enemy who noticed everything. And as the first words of the meeting cut through the air, Michael Turner knew the war had begun.